this is a serious breach, and there is more to the story to be told. It shows the extreme position that we are in here as Americans, as those who want to take this country down, those who want to invade the privacy of Americans, have the capabilities of breaching this. And the legislation that before us, and the reason why it's brought here now and hopefully attached to the defense bill, is that this needs to be done now, not later. How many breaches do we have to hear about, whether it's the private sector or whether it's the government sector, before this Congress and this Senate will stand up and say, we have the capability of preventing some of these things from happening, but we need the legislative authority to do it. And to delay and not even allow us to go forward with this, it puts more and more millions of Americans at risk, whether they work for the government or whether they're in private industry.
And isn't it true, I'd ask my colleague from Indiana, that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff recently stated that in the potential of our adversaries to threaten our security, we have a definite superiority in all areas except for one, in the issue of cybersecurity. Isn't that correct?
Well, I think that's obvious, because clearly, while we have the capability to address some of these issues, we're not allowed to use the capability. This legislation gives us the opportunity to have a cooperative effort, and some of those who resisted the use of this because they think it was potentially a breach of privacy now understand that the breaches are occurring from outside into the United States for those who are enemies of the state, those who are criminal groups, those who are terrorist groups. And while we may have the capacity to deal with this, without this legislative authority, we are not allowed to use it. And so what an irony. What an irony that some of those who are saying, well, we can't trust the government on this to help us. This is a defense. It's like saying we can't trust the Department of Defense. You can't trust the Army or the Navy to protect us from attack because it's government run. Well, now they're saying there's some operations in government here that are part of our defenses that can't be used until we have the authority. And the irony is that people's privacies are being breached by all these attempts, and we're denying the opportunity to put the tools in place to stop that from happening.
Could I ask my colleague again? The 4 million people whose privacy was just breached, 4 million Americans. What damage, what potential damage is that to those individual Americans?
Well, we're just learning what damage this is and how it can be misused in any number of ways. And some of this information is classified, but I can say to my colleague from Arizona, the chairman of the Armed Services Committee, that this puts some of our people and some of our systems in great peril. It's something that needs to be addressed now, not pushed down the line.
So it seems to me that to those 4 million Americans, that we owe them, that it is our responsibility, in fact, our urgent responsibility, to try to prevent that same kind of breach be perpetrated on 4 million or 8 million or 10 million more Americans. If they're capable of doing it once to 4 million Americans, what's to keep them from doing the same thing to millions of Americans more? If we sit here idly by and do nothing on the grounds that the objection is that it's not part of the Department of Defense bill, which seems to me almost ludicrous.
Well, since the Department of Defense is one of those entities that's being attacked, I would certainly think this is an appropriate attachment to a bill that hopefully, if we're given the opportunity here by our friends across the aisle, hopefully we'll be able to pass here in the Senate and move on to the House and get it to the President so that these authorities can be in place. You know, the Senator mentioned 4 million. A company whose headquarters is in the state of Indiana, Anthem, insurance company, they were breached, and this is public information. It was 80 million people on their rolls. So that's almost a third of all of every American. has had their private information breached by a cyber attack. And not to mention the threat that comes from a cyber attack on our critical infrastructure. What if they take down the financial system of one of our major banks or of several of our banks? What if they take down the financial transactions that take place on Wall Street every day? What if they shut down electric power grid in the middle of February when the temperatures in Northeast are in minus Fahrenheit temperatures, or when it's 110 degrees in Phoenix and you lose your power and you can't turn on an air conditioner? People will die. People will be severely impacted by this. And to not go forward and give authorization to use the tools to try to better protect American safety is, I think, not only unreasonable, but it's a very serious thing.